We can't say the future without AI. I mean, there's no way around it. 50% of workers now believe AI is going to improve their experience. When I come into the meeting room, I need a way to incorporate my AI with what's going on in the meeting. It's almost a bring your own AI type of a concept. Most of what we do in our day-to-day is going to change significantly.
Hear the latest AV trends and predictions in this episode of Crestron's Smarter Spaces podcast on your preferred podcast platform.
Where I think Resi does it, again, absolutely well, where we walk into the environment, we go, you want to see something cool?
Yeah.
And then we bring it out, they go, oh, wait, I got to have, there's a joy of why you got into Resi.
This is where the fun begins.
Taking a look back at InfoComm 2025. Yes, it's a commercial show, but residential dealers can learn from it, and what commercial dealers can learn from the Resi market. All that and more next on ResiWeek. This is ResiWeek, episode 488, recorded Monday, June 16th, 2025. Resi Shift. This is ResiWeek, the look at the residential side of the audiovisual industry. I am not Matt Scott. My name is Tim Albright. I am in for wherever the heck Matt Scott is. With me to talk about the residential side of the AV industry, first and foremost, Mr. Jason Griffing from OneVision. How are you, sir?
I'm doing great, Tim. Thanks for having me.
Thank you. And also a young man that I got to hang out with in Orlando for almost an entire week, which has never happened. My buddy, my pal, my brother, Mr. Richard Fregosa. How are you, sir?
I'm doing great. It's great to see you, buddy.
Good to see you, buddy.
Well worth the effort. Although I think we're just going to sink in your lips where you'll just stop and they'll go, this is, and then we'll drop in Resi Week.
That'll work.
AV Week. This is a state of control. Right? We're just going to do all three shows at once. We're going to do the simulcast of all three shows at once. We'll bring everybody in.
Had Mitchell warned me, which he probably did, I just wasn't paying attention, we could have just synced in and just, copied and pasted what we recorded on Friday. From the show floor.
Which also belated happy birthday to Mr. Albright. And, hold on. This man has a new title, which he doesn't want to talk about, because now I shall only refer to him as the Hall of Famer. Tim did receive a Hall of Fame award, an industry award at InfoComm, so we cannot let the moment pass.
Oh, we could.
I'm humbled to be in your presence, Tim.
Oh my God!
Well, as you will now see, Tim is going to take a book out of the Ricky Henderson playbook and only refer to himself in the third person now. So.
Yeah, that's exactly what I'll do. Tim Albright does not talk to commoners. Tim Albright does not.
Again, I'm embarrassing you, but why don't you take 30 seconds, because it really was. It was pretty special, and honestly, after a decade plus.
Yep.
Working his ass off in this industry, especially given that we are on AVNation right now. I think it's up to Tim to kind of talk what he got the award for, big boy.
So thank you. The fine folks at Higher Ed AV and HETMA, it was very nice. It was a very nice honor. Inducted me into their Hall of Fame as an ally of theirs. It is where I came from. Higher ed space when I started. When I met Rich Fregosa, I was a technology manager, and actually referenced you and our buddy Bradford Ben in my impromptu speech, because they didn't warn me that I'd be giving a speech. But absolutely went back to the roots. Absolutely went back to the start. If you've never heard the story, the 30-second version is I stumbled upon Rich Fregosa and Bradford Ben on Google Hangouts, Google Plus, and the small engineering side of my brain goes, I can probably plug this into a recorder somewhere and record this. And there begat AVNation, right? And AV Week as an extension of that. It was very, very nice. And it was a nice evening. And you're right, Richie, it was very nice to be recognized and honored. So thank you, sir.
Congratulations.
Congrats, Tim. That's awesome. Well deserved.
Thank you. So we are going to cover InfoComm. We are going to cover Mr. Richie and I sweating our butts off in Orlando's humidity and heat. But really, it was the show itself, right? 800 some odd exhibitors, roughly 31,000, not quite, but basically close enough to 31,000 qualified attendees. One thing I will give Avixa credit for is, since COVID, they have introduced this idea of qualified attendees, where that is the number of registrations, which was roughly 39,000, minus press, right? And any exhibitors. And so that gives you a good net of the folks that were there to see, to be scanned, to have conversations. Slight uptick from Vegas last year over year, not much. I think the number for Vegas last year was 30,200, 30,300, something like that. One of the highlights from Avixa, the press release they sent out, was the fact that it was the largest percentage of end users, 35%, as opposed to, I think the highest they had to this point was 30 or 33%. But this is a residential show. However, there was a number of what I'll call crossover exhibitors there. And Rich, we're going to start with you since you and I were both there. The big ones, right? Crestron, Legrand, Sony. These are folks that show at both CEDIA and InfoComm. RTI, a new
Snap
member.
AV.
Snap AV, right?
Division of conglomerate XYZ now. I've lost track of.
Well, yeah, and they own everybody and their brother, probably pretty soon Google. But what as a Resi dealer watching this show, right? That if you don't attend it, what is something that they should take away from last week? What is something they should glean from you going, right? From folks like me going and covering it, and not just us. I mean, Residential Systems was there, our friends over at AV Network. Rave certainly was there. Commercial Integrator, right? One of the folks that puts on the CEDIA show and the CI Expo. What is some things that they should pull out of this show, either overarching or specific from a technology standpoint?
We were talking about before we were recording slightly with Jason on this. I think one of the keys right now is that the CI market, it's not the same market from 1990. Mm-hmm. And although there are a lot of people still involved who kind of take their roots back to 1990 or, even the, mid 2000s, late 2000s, right? I'm kind of aging myself here, but the CI market was always about innovation. The CI market was always about finding problems and then providing custom solutions for those problems. The way that the consumer market is going is that, we're in again with that handheld device, with streaming, with just the change in the technology from a hardware-centered to software-centered world, the same way that corporate and enterprise had to also make the same shift. It's kind of this paradox that's occurred is that Resi used to kind of lead the way on being the kind of crazy guys sitting in a laboratory mixing something up, and away they went from the hardware standpoint. And, you had your visionaries, and you had the Sam Runkos and the Chris Stevens and, just Haggai Geffen, all of these guys who were sitting out there who said, we're coming up with innovative solutions for problems that aren't necessarily being addressed. And for the CI market now that you're dealing with, again, kind of like this standardized product that we're seeing in the software-centric solutions, it's easy to get caught up in that wave and kind of react to where the business is going instead of trying to find your inroads. And I think that InfoComm, and honestly, any of the shows, the commercial, the Resi the NAM side, getting involved in, we've always said it, in the interior design community, the architectural community, all these communities, is that you should be going because there are great tools there that the greater commercial segment doesn't want to try to enter the residential market.
Nope.
But there are tons of opportunities that are being used every day in classrooms, huddle spaces, corporate boardrooms, executive boardrooms, network operations centers, emergency operations centers, courthouses. All of this technology that's there are being used for very specific purposes because it's kind of driven, right? It's a market-driven approach. It's a solution-driven approach. They state, and you're still dealing with the specifier community, and they're saying, we have problem X. This is how we want to execute it. And all these companies bring these tools to the table, and commercial dealers will look and say, great, we do this. Now, from a scale standpoint, we need to be able to do 10 of these, 15 of these, 50 of these, or deploy 1,000 of these. The beauty of the CI market, most of them are smaller, and most of the people are talking to are smaller organizations. those are all the opportunities. Those are the nuggets. That's what I always say. Those where the niches and the riches are, right? The riches and the niches.
Yeah.
Because you can find them, you can spot them, you can leverage them, and it becomes your secret sauce, right? Everybody's selling a streamer. Everybody's selling a $700 TV. Everybody's selling a set of in-wall speakers. What is it that you're bringing? Are you bringing engineering expertise, design expertise, acoustic expertise? Did you go and actually spend time with the Fluke guys at InfoComm and figured out what the tester does and why you should be doing this and certifying your networks that you're providing in these houses? Like all these things that, the running joke used to be, the Resi guys, we were the cowboys. We were the guys that are running off and just kind of going nuts. And the commercial industry were the grown-ups of the industry. And we didn't want to be that, right? We didn't want to be the guys in the ties and the matching polo shirts walking, 4 across through the show floor. CI started out as pure rock and roll and anarchy half the time. And oddly enough, I think that there's a lot to be found and from that guerrilla marketing style of sales and getting in and seeing those pieces that are robust, stable, have great price points, profitability, and the ability to sell after the fact. Where, I talked to a lot of these Resi guys that they're struggling to find profit centers, right? They've now, it's great when they moved into service-oriented sales and spreading out their market, but I say it every time on every other show and even on the programming side is that, I think right now if CI guys are willing to be extremely brutal with their weaknesses and actually realize that those other markets are something that's not being used in their market, that gives you the opportunity to keep your company moving forward and growing and being innovative. And, if you're the guy, the tech guy, it's my AV guy. If that's your identity, nothing wrong with that, but the market's changed. But if you're going to be that AV guy, you absolutely need to be working in these other markets and bringing those markets into you. And, in the old days, like I said, it was rock and roll. We'd make it up and we'd find somebody who was sitting there and, a warehouse someplace and taking somebody's projector and, turbocharging it. We're seeing that on the other side of the commercial side. They're just trying to figure out how to do it at scale. And they're great opportunities. So, again, you absolutely in this market right now, you need to be cross-training.
Jason, Richard brings up actually a couple of really good points. There are different markets. Let's just start there, right, in the commercial side. And that there's no secret here. That is where I have lived almost my entire career. Certainly have friends, certainly have friends that they live and breathe in the Resi market. And I don't want to answer the question for you because I've got an answer in my head. But when you talk to your clients at OneVision, what areas do they feel comfortable going outside of residential, right? And I have made no bones about the fact that I love the term Resi-mercial. I actually got a little bit beat up last week from an old Resi guy who is
it gets
now,
the job done, right?
It does, and
Yeah.
it's kitschy, and quite frankly, it draws the ire of some people that I like, drawing the ire from. But I don't care if you call it like commercial. I don't care what. Regardless, it's not somebody's house, right? Let's start with that fact. You're putting AV into some place that's not somebody's house. Okay, therefore it's not residential. So regardless of what level of commercial you call it, Rich is right. Whether it was from the 2008 housing crash when you had to make money, right? You had to make payroll. You had to put food on your table and those of your employees. So these folks started branching out into other areas that were not inherently residential. What markets are they tackling and do they feel most comfortable with? And by extension, what would they have pulled from InfoComm this past week based on those markets that they are playing in?
Yeah. So, at OneVision, as you kind of alluded to, we do work with lots of integrators who dabble in the commercial space. Residential is definitely our bread and butter. We do a lot more work on the residential side, I would say. But generally speaking, we see a lot of integrators doing really well with that diversification that you alluded to. And I won't belabor that. We've talked about that as an industry for a really long time. Not having all of your eggs in one basket is a great thing. Like when the housing market turns, it's good to have some exposure to commercial for all kinds of reasons, right? something that comes to mind for me is there's a lot of like research around creativity, which is hugely important in business. It's not just for artists, right? Like creative problem solving, bringing ingenuity and innovation to your company. And all of the research around that suggests that it's often not about inventing new things, but about discovering maybe not non-obvious connections between things that people haven't spotted before. So I think about, attending InfoComm. If I'm a residential integrator, like Richard was alluding to, there's probably a ton of opportunities there to just spot things that even if maybe this widget or piece of gear doesn't map directly to your business, maybe it gives you some ideas about ways to approach design and engineering that you might not have thought of otherwise. Beyond that, one of the big things that comes to mind for me is just the level of like operational sophistication and maturity. And it runs the gamut on the residential side, right? There's tons of integrators out there on the residential side who run very, very sophisticated operations. And then all the way down to just, Bob in his truck, right? And like, I'm not disparaging anybody along that spectrum, but I think ultimately, there's, again, coming back to that idea of just learning and being exposed to different ways of thinking and different ideas. I think going into the commercial space, going to a show like InfoComm and just meeting people and talking to them about ways that they're approaching certain aspects of their business. So Richard alluded to design and engineering as a couple of examples, but I immediately go to service and support. On the residential side, it's a growing trend and obviously something at OneVision that we're a big part of and happy to see this growing trend of integrators taking service more seriously, putting together service and support programs and things like that. But my understanding and exposure to the commercial side is it's more common. There's a bit more rigor around it as far as looking at the sale as just the beginning of a long time relationship when you're going to be managing that facility or that installation for many, many years to come. And so I think just that level of being service minded, of thinking about your client relationships in a really long term, taking a long view of those relationships, and then installing systems that allow you to effectively remotely monitor and manage, and then monetize on that ongoing support as well. So I think, again, zooming back out, the idea of just seeing things from a different vantage point, I think is incredibly valuable. And then specifically the kind of operational maturity and sophistication, I think generally in the commercial side, there's probably a lot that we could learn on the residential side from paying more attention to that.
Richie, Jason brings up a really good point. And asking this acknowledges the fact that this might be all we cover today, and that's okay. Based on the fact that, especially on the services side, Jason's right. From on the commercial side, there are, let's call it more evolved or more mature service offerings and operations. What can both of these sides of the AV equation learn from each other? What can Resi learn from commercial? But on the other hand, what can commercial learn that the residential dealers just do better?
We were talking about earlier, again, before the recording, and as somebody who, crosses kind of the weirdest.
That's why I asked you first.
So there's the interesting part, right? And Jason and I were talking about this just earlier, is that on the Resi side, when you get involved in Resi, you're committing to a 24/7 lifestyle, whether you want to or not, because you were dealing in people's homes. You're dealing with something that is emotionally important to them. And it is a minefield of emotions that occur as well. A frustration at home in your personal space is far different than a frustration in your workspace. Again, where you live is not where you work. Where you work, you tend to make the emotional, the mental disconnect of this is a different space. Your home is your retreat. It's, again, it's highly personal. You've outfitted it to your taste. You go into an office, it's like, okay, yeah, well, the office manager, whoever decided it, and I got my office or cubicle or whatever, and maybe I can put some extra plants in here or something. That's about as far as an emotional attachment you get to your space. So there's kind of a middle ground for the both, right? The commercial dealers have learned that it is important to draw a line, and it's important to set expectations, and it's important to have a process towards those expectations. If you have a problem, this is the first step that will occur. If that first step doesn't meet the objectives, then it'll get escalated to a next step and then to a next step. And there are associated costs with what you feel is the inconvenience factor. Everybody's here at a level playing field. If you feel that you need front of the line service, you are going to pay for front of the line service. Additionally, the commercial side is a lot better about saying it's not if your system will have an issue, it's when your system will have an issue. As such, we have regular life cycles that we deal with these to minimize them as much as possible. And it's a very logical conversation that occurs because, again, the typically the IT manager, say it's the chief operating officer, right? If you're dealing with people in the C-suite side of things, they're not emotionally invested. They're just looking at dollars and cents. If this goes down, we lose productivity. If we lose productivity, we lose money, right? I've got employees running around doing nothing. So there's a much more logical approach to it. If all of a sudden you lose your favorite show at 8:00 on Saturday night because your device logged you out and you can't remember your password and your grandkids are over and they need to see the latest, episode of Bluey, that is a whole different level of emotions. However, the devices are the same. It was not going to be a matter of if they failed. It was going to be a matter of when they failed. And on the Resi side, because it is a personalized interaction, and again, there are larger Resi organizations who do take a different approach to it. But I'm talking about kind of the bread and butter CI group of passionate individuals who really care about what they do and care about the customer service. So they are the ones that are going to hand out the cell phone to the client. They are going to be the ones that are going to be accessible on a Saturday or a Sunday. And that's all well and good. The issue, though, is that so many CI dealers have never understood or never been given the economical framework to understand that is a product and you are giving away the product. And if you give away enough of the product, you will overwhelm yourself to the point that you can't sustain what you're doing. And, the kind of every starting integrator I've started out with as they're kind of scaling up, and we've always had the talk, and I sit them down and I'm like, okay, great. And there's lots of better people who do the business side of things than I do, but I just have one quick conversation with them, which is more about longevity and more about how you approach a project, which is, great, here's your project. What did you sell it for? I sold it for X. Great. What was your GP on this project? I made it for this. Okay, so that's what you made today. 3 years from now, divide that by 3. How much did you spend on this project? Truck rolls.
Yep.
2 in the afternoon phone calls on Super Bowl Sunday. Midnight. Again, 4 a.m. phone.
Yep.
Again, part of what we do. I've had many people who have, and again, I gladly pass it on, and the more people use it, but as the original digital concierge, I might say, I'm glad that thought process is now kind of expanding beyond me, right? It was kind of my whole bespoke shtick, right? Yeah. And people are kind of onto it, but they're learning. I'm glad because people are starting to embrace it and seeing that is your product, that is your sauce, that is, and you should be paid appropriately for it. So the point being is that what commercial can learn from Resi and where it's been great for us is that we provide instant response. In the commercial world, I get a whole lot of, what? What do you mean? And we go through our process. Like, this is why we do it. This is why we're here. We're here to provide this level of service, and we are being compensated for it, right? And they're going, great. And I'm like, that's in your budget line. And that goes through, your budget for the next year, and they cycle it out. You should be doing that in Resi. You should be selling your systems as an ecosystem. I am putting this part in, but what I am doing is I am establishing the fact that you now have a technologist who is flattening all of these hurdles for you, who is minimizing your inconvenience, who is giving you the tools for the when, not the if. And over the course of a year, 2 years, 3 years, whether you want me checking in and you want me on your phone within 24 hours, cool, no problem. Whether every 3 months I'm just doing a spot check and I'm just making sure that, especially with the tools OneVision provides, and because again, here are the things. Well, here's tier 1, right? You call me on Friday, we've got a 24 to 48 hour to business reply, right? That's kind of standard. You want tier 2? We have a managed service who we work with. We won't necessarily be the one that you call, but they have trained staff who are going to work you through most of the common issues. That is your value add solution. You then have, what everybody loves, right? Everybody talks about they want bespoke. It's the monkey's paw. When you chase after the bespoke market, you are absolutely marrying yourself to that project, into that ecosystem. You are making yourself part of the nervous system of that house. If you then decide to go to tier 3, okay, great. Now, here's where you are creating the value for what you do. And we've said it many, many times in the programming community, in the Resi community, there's this identity crisis that occurs and this imposter system that they shouldn't be asking for what they're worth. Now, granted, you're young and you're starting out into the company and you're doing some stuff. You might not be worth it yet. You might think you're worth it, but you haven't put your tools in place. And it's something to aspire to. And there's nothing wrong with that. There's nothing wrong with saying, hey, that's why you reach out to companies like Jason's, which are the bridge company until you can get it out or you have a long-standing partnership. Commercial figured that out. Commercial figured out, hey, we only have X amount of employees. We've got 3 different cities that we're deploying stuff. We're going to reach out to contract technicians and engineers who come in specifically. They're not giving away secret sauce. It's not like, oh my gosh, they're going to take our business away from us. No, they brought in professionals to do a job. Resi's still built with a lot of ego and the I have to do it myself stubbornness. And I think that's, the biggest lesson to learn is that, bring everybody in. It seems like you're taking a slice of the pie away, but you just made it a bigger pie. Yeah, you may have a slice, but it's a whole lot bigger pie. No. So there's Uncle Richie's fireside chat about that one.
All right, Jason, same question: is what can Resi learn from commercial?
Well, I don't want to be presumptuous and tell the commercial guys what we're doing better on the Resi side, right? I think that maybe one thing that does come to mind. And I'm sure there's some commercial guys out there listening, like, yeah, I do this already. But when Richard frames up the home environment, when you're working directly with a homeowner, you're in that personal space, it's very emotion driven. There's a lot of feeling. And that can, when you're thinking about those midnight service calls and things like that, that emotion can feel like a liability. On the other side, it gives you an opportunity to really connect with that client on a different level where you're not just a row on a budget, right? And so ultimately, I think just remembering that even in business, you're still dealing with human beings, right? And making sure that you're bringing that high level of emotional intelligence and just people skills to your work. Because even though it may be more budget driven and productivity driven in business, ultimately people make decisions based on how they feel more than what, we like to think that we're very rational creatures and that we're really thinking things through. But ultimately, we make decisions based on intuition and gut feel way more often than any of us care to admit. And then we back those decisions up with facts that we kind of cherry pick to, align with where we landed. And so ultimately, that's the one thing that comes to mind is just bringing that really high level of emotional white glove sort of handling into your work, I think is something that the good residential integrators at least do really, really well. And again, I'm sure the great commercial integrators are doing that really well as well. But maybe those companies just starting out, when you're in the commercial space, maybe the dynamics of the business on that side might push you a little bit more towards being very just kind of business, trying to get your system engineered down to the cheapest possible solution and just kind of forgetting that ultimately, like, there's this whole human side to business as well. So that's one thing that comes to mind.
I like that.
And always remember, for the Resi side, you're doing something cool. So many times you forget to have the conversation with your client going, you want to see something cool?
Yep.
And that is a big part where I think Resi does it, again, absolutely well, where, again, sometimes you feel like you can only do so many huddle spaces. But even then, we walk into the environment and go, you want to see something cool?
Yeah.
And then we bring it up, they go, oh, wait, I got to have, there's a joy of why you got into Resi. Again, like I said, most of us got in because, our bands weren't going to take off, or we just were, or like now it's like, hey, man, my tats, I'm not going to make it, in a 9-to-5 situation. Me, it's like, the fact that I have to wear pants to a meeting upsets me. I've got to that point in my career.
But we appreciate that.
I am absolutely sure. But I'm just kind of reflecting on this, and Jason and I are talking, and it's not as somber as sometimes, we worry about, right? It's like, oh yeah, it could be doing this. And it's like, no, it's fun. It's infectious. It's an extension. You got into this because half the time it was either your hobby or you were just a frustrated musician or, stagehand or something. I mean, you talk to everybody about kind of like where they came from. There's a whole lot of commonalities when you find yourself in the CI market.
Yeah.
And so, there should be excitement in the opportunities. You should be excited to go to InfoComm. You should be excited to go to NAM. You should be excited to go to, a kitchen and bath show. Like, if you're not excited, there's only X then that you're actually exposing yourself to what you say you love. There's a whole lot in there. It's like, hey, if you want to do personal theaters, there's an entire environment about there that you should be going to the theater goers conventions, right? And seeing the technology that's out there. It's like, okay, if you're trying to replicate that experience, it's the reason why Theo had his books out, right? All the great cinema houses, they all have a show. They all get together. These are the things that if you're as passionate about your industry as you say you are, then you should be trying to gather as much as you can that's out there to fuel your passion. Because sometimes you get burnt out. And sometimes even just going to that other show just reignites you in ways that you didn't even think about in that moment.
And Richie didn't necessarily tee this up, and not that you need another show to go to or another reason to go to Vegas. Every year, if you are interested in theaters, go to CinemaCon. CinemaCon literally is the theater, the cinema theater trade show for big houses, right? For big theater houses, right? For your local metroplex. But dude, as somebody who's gone there, you can glean some really wicked ideas for somebody's home theater, right? No, you're not going to put in 1,000 seats, but you're going to find some seats that are kick ass, right? And yes, they have popcorn machines and slushy machines, which is always not a bad thing either. So, all right.
I think that's a great example of that creativity idea that I alluded to earlier, right? Like going to these shows that maybe aren't completely unrelated to what you're doing, but they're out there a little bit. They're adjacent industries. Those are really ripe opportunities to go learn. And even if you're just picking up things like decor, like you said, popcorn machines, like things you just might not even think of that you can kind of bring to the table to make your proposals a little more unique. And then of course there's all the tech and everything like that. I worked in the Southern California market for many years as an integrator doing ultra luxury, and we were doing theaters out there that were, in some respects using identical equipment to some of the big theaters. And so depending on what level of the market that you're operating at, some of that stuff might be directly relevant as well. But I think this broader idea of just passion and craftsmanship and love for the work and being out there just learning and curious and exposing yourself to these other ideas and ways of thinking about the problems that you grapple with as a business, I think is all really valuable.
Thank you both so much. I appreciate it. Brother Fregosa, thank you, sir. Again, good to see you in person. How do people connect with you or Fregosa Design?
If you want to find us, you can find us on the socials at rfregosa. FregosaDesign.com is the website address, hopefully, as I always say. Where I hope you find me is on AVNation.tv, and our suite of shows serving all the verticals in the market. Hopefully, other than ResiWeek or AV Week, I do invite you to come visit my partners, the Greenblatt and I, now entering our 11th year on A State of Control, our show that speaks directly about the control system and AV automation industry at large.
And next month we'll be talking
and support our sponsors.
And support our sponsors. Next month we'll be talking about who owns the code, and I can't wait to hear that one. So, Mr. Griffing, thank you, sir.
Part 9.
I know. Griffing, how do people connect with you or OneVision?
Well, Tim, first of all, as a Hall of Famer, I'm grateful to have been in your presence today. Congrats on that, and happy belated birthday. The moment passed earlier, but I didn't get a chance to say that. So I really appreciate the opportunity to come back on again. You know, if people want to connect with me, you can just search me up on LinkedIn, Jason Griffing, and check out our website at OneVisionResources.com. That's where you'll find all the information about what we're doing to help integrators with their service and support needs. So again, thanks for having me, Tim. I appreciate it.
Thank you so much. For Tim Albright, don't follow me anywhere. I have gotten to the point where if you want to read something that I've written that has nothing to do with technology, you can connect with me on LinkedIn. I swear to you, it has nothing to do with tech. Every once in a while, I'll write something, but it has other stuff to do with other stuff. Last time I wrote about my daily habits, and I called it Tim OS. So I see I'm already referring to myself in the third person, right?
It starts. This is how it starts.
This is how it starts. AVNation.tv. That's AVNation.tv. You'll find this program and a host of others. We'd reference this, but the first of 2 episodes from InfoComm is already landed, so you can check that out. We recorded it in our friends Midwich in their booth. Richie also talked about A State of Control. That is also up, where we look at Crestron Masters 2025 that came to you from Madrid, and is one of the rare occasions where I am somewhat qualified to be on State of Control anymore. So you can hear me and a couple other folks. Go by the website, AVNation.tv. That's AVNation.tv. Thanks so much for listening. Thank you so much for watching. That is all the time we have for ResiWeek.
The network for the AV industry.
What are you listening to?
This
is AV.
This
is AVNation.
This is AVNation.
This is Erin Marmoran of EdTech. The world of higher ed AV is growing rapidly. That's why each month we hear from the best and brightest from colleges and universities all over the U.S. Check out EdTech on avnation.tv or wherever you get your favorite podcasts.